So if you're here in this video, you want help creating your fellowship in the War in the North, whether it's the Legacy Edition or the original game, to be as strong as you possibly can get them. And that is what we're going to do. We're going to go over the primary stats for each character, as well as the abilities that you should have in your skill tree and the weapons that you will want to have. Now, my character is only level 19 on the Legacy Edition. I just started playing and I'm on my second playthrough, but this tutorial will go over some of the more advanced properties as well for what you can do to get your characters to be as strong as possible stat wise. I'll have a different guide for best gear because the gearing process in War in the North, in order to really achieve some absurd damage numbers, is a little bit more convoluted and will require a little bit more setup and stuff. So that will be its own guide on its own. So this process will work really well for this tutorial will work really well if you were speedrunning the game or if you were just wanting to have a very optimal build that will work really well for every single character. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started with our favorite dwarf here, Farin of Erebor. So for the stats, we'll start with the stat tree. Okay. The primary stats that you are going to want to level for Farin are his strength and dexterity. The main things between those two is strength will increase his melee weapon attack damage, and then his dexterity will increase his damage with his crossbow. I always prioritize strength pretty much until it hits 30. That will pretty much get you set up to be where you will be using any melee weapon. There might be other weapons later on in the gearing process that might require higher strength, but that's going to come a lot more in your future playthroughs. And once you hit higher levels, you can just push up to those other areas of strength so that way you can get what you need there. You will need to have a good chunk of stamina as well. Stamina is going to be very, very useful for equipping armor. I think it's a similar situation with strength where kind of once it hits 30, you should be pretty good to go from there. So those are the main things for stats. Will is Farin's least important. That gives him maximum power, but you don't need that to be as optimal as it might seem because the primary ability that we use as Farin doesn't actually burn through power that much. And with some of the other bonuses that you'll get from the other characters that we'll talk about in a moment, will actually make it where Farin won't lose power so much, and your biggest worry when it comes to Farin is going to be ammo. So in ammo, crossbow bolts is in his items. Crossbow bolts is a big thing. I currently don't have any because that's just how the AI works when you play single player. The AI tends to dump their resources. That's why I have no potions or bolts. But you want to make sure that you have all the bolts in the world for Farin to be used optimally. In terms of skills, this is what my skill tree looks like right now, and I'll kind of talk about like what the thought process is behind every single ability. But there are two main abilities that Farin will be getting that he will use to make him as strong as possible. So the first one is explosive bolt. This is going to be the first ability that you want to speed run towards. And in order to do that, my skill tree looked like this. I started with sweeping attack, then I got heavy weapons to increase the damage with two-handed melee weapons, and then I did one thing on just sweeping attack, and then I mostly focused on the passive health regeneration just to help him be more tanky, and then I added this just to unlock explosive bolt. So I got that, and that will give you explosive bolt, which is a very, very strong attack and will really help you deal with mobs in waves. Because area of effect, you can pretty much delete most mobs in a circle really quickly, even especially once you get the right gear. The next thing is you want to level up your Warcry. Warcry will temporarily increase armor, health, and melee damage, and this does affect the entire party. So this becomes another really, really big skill to have. And then you just want to do what you can to kind of buff war. Like once you get your explosive arrow maxed out, you'll want to just buff your Warcry as much as possible. So you'll get I always get this one, Warcry, the Dwarf Armor, ignore heavier hit reactions, and also increases the armor of nearby party members. Reducing the cooldown of active skills, so any skills that you use, those will become stronger. And then you can do This, which shifts the focus to the dwarf and damages nearby enemies and increases the damage that they take. So this will help to make the taunt will just overall increase your overall DPS, which is really strong. And then there's also retaliation, which is where during Warcry, melee damage absorbed by the champion is reflected back to the enemy. So these are the 4 primary bonuses you want to get on this tree. And then over here, I added this Earthshaker was just to add the bonus to get explosive arrow, hence why it's only at level 1. But then you want Abundant Harm, which is during Warcry, your melee attacks will echo to nearby enemies, striking them for damage. So while your Explosive Bolt would be on cooldown, you can then utilize your Warcry to be able to reflect more damage off to multiple different enemies. And this is probably another one that you could grab too, Fortitude. I didn't grab it during my speed run because I wasn't worried about health, but this will be something that I will grab later. It grants temporary combat health regeneration for the dwarf and any party members. So you'll get additional health regen during Warcry, and then Indomitable Spirit will work well as well. You can activate Warcry to get a fallen ally to instantly revive them. Another nice ability to have, but it's not fully necessary. And then another on this side of the tree, this tree I am only just now focusing on, but I'll probably honestly get Fortitude first. But you can get Battle Fury, which will increase the Warcry damage bonus and increases melee damage done by party members. And then you'll want Heavy Bolt to give you a high damage bolt that you can use as a single target damage. And then Crossbow Upgraded, Crossbow Adept, upgrade your crossbow from Shingle Shot to Rapid Fire. Those are really nice. And then skills used while Warcry is active will cost less power. So if you're still worried about power consumption, then you will want to get Battle Ready. I think eventually, once you max out your character, you will have every single skill available to you. So you'll get them. This is just kind of my recommendation for order priority. If you're looking at wanting to just maximize your DPS output, this is definitely one that I will add into my repertoire. I honestly hadn't read over the skills in a while when I did my speed run that set up these characters the way that they are. So, moving on to the next character, we're going to take a look at our favorite ranger, Eradan. Now, Eradan is really difficult to build optimally because of how the AI functions with him. Because a resource dump, you're pretty much just always going to find Eradan in a situation where he's not going to have any arrows if you have him as an AI companion primarily. And so, unless you are maining Eradan in a co op playthrough or even in your single player playthrough, you'll probably find him without arrows pretty often. But in terms of stats, you'll pretty much want to have your stats reflect very similarly to Farin's. You want to get his strength up to about 30, his stamina up to about 30, and then the rest of his damage output you'll put into dexterity, because then his bow and arrow will be at its most max. If you are primarily using your save file for single player and you're finding yourself with an empty quiver, you can just dump more points into strength, and that will increase Eradan's damage output with individual weapons. So that way his melee damage is stronger because he'll be using primarily more melee by that point. And then in terms of skills, if you're running a dex ranged based build, you'll want to prioritize just this skill tree. Just max it out as much as possible. Because then you can just get all of your bow skills. You get a headshot bonus with your entire party, increase maximum arrows, increase damage of bow attacks, as well as attack speed. And then maximize your heavy shot, which is this, a massive shot that works really, really well for single target DPS. And then you can have your volley, which fires multiple arrows, and that will make life a lot easier there. And then your stunning shot is great because it can pretty much trigger a hero mode. And if you coordinate that with a party member, you could theoretically keep them in hero mode the whole time, increasing your overall DPS. And then if you're going more on a strength-based build, you can run Ranger Strike, which and then I always do two-handed. You could do dual wielding, but I have found that I prefer two-handed weapons over dual wielding. I think it's just easier to manage your stats overall. So with Eradan, you'll grab the heavy weapons, and then you can grab Cleave for a additional follow-up. For a bigger strike, and then but I always recommend getting Blood of Westerness first because it will reduce your cooldown time for your active skills. And then agility is a big one because then you'll get an armor bonus based on your dex. So the higher your dex, then the better your armor will be. And then the rest of these are pretty much just this side of your skill tree is your evasion skill tree, and this will just basically make your evasion even more powerful. Except for this, increases hero mode damage and improves the rate of your attacks that build critical strikes. But the rest of these just boost evasion. I never use evasion, so I will be saving this side of the tree for absolutely last because I can't find the main uses for evasion. Maybe it's better uh later in the game, but at least for primary fights and stuff, it's not great. So that's pretty much what you got to know for building Eradan. Obviously, you want to keep his ammo full. I'm just gonna Farin quick because the more bolts he has, the more arrows he has, the more effective his ranged weapons are gonna be. But as you can see, as an AI companion, he blows through them really quickly. But he's got a really really dope sword. I don't. They're all like early game weapons. All right. Now, moving on to our final character, we have Andriel. Andriel is honestly my personal favorite character out of the trio. I think she has the most amount of benefit both on a DPS side as well as on a support side. And she's the easiest to manage, really. A lot of people might find difficulty with her because all of her stuff is based around her magic. But with her having that bonus for her magic, it makes it a lot easier to manage how she functions. So we're gonna look at her build. I've been maining her on this file since I did my speed run because she's just the most fun to play. So for stats, Will is going to be your big one. I don't honestly know how much Dex even affects her main source of range damage because her everything is magic based, and since Will boosts your skill, like your damage for things that cost power, you want to just give her as much will as possible. That will make her staff so strong, and that will then give her the ability to do some insane damage that you'll be able to see, especially when you get later on in like the higher playthroughs once you finished gearing and things like that. Your playthroughs, you'll just be blowing up enemies, and then you'll really go on this crazy power trip, and it will be super fun. In terms of skills, this right side of the tree is probably your most important. You want to get the Empower Staff to power up your range attacks, firing multiple charges at once, and then increases damage done with staves, increases the rate that staff's range attack charge, and increases the damage of bonus of charged shots. Wrath of the Eldar just dispels your sanctuary, so that's a really nice ability to have, but it's not like crazy important. And then Burst of Light is going to be Andriel's most powerful ability. It works as her explosive shot. So if I do that and fire it off, it will explode in an AoE damage range, destroying enemies in the process. And it is very strong. And then the rest of the tree, you're pretty much just going to be set up how you want it. There are going to be a few huge priority skills that you want, especially on this left side. So there is preservation, which will skills used by any party member cost less power. So having that is going to be absolutely massive because power management is the big thing for Andriel. You really want to make sure that you keep her power up and just all of the party in general. So doing that is really good. And then focused mind will upgrade her power regen. Again, really helps to make the power as optimal as possible. So you'll definitely want that. And then the rest of this tree is just going to be some additional bonuses for Sanctuary and some extra healing. So nothing that's like crazy necessary. Going on to the middle skill tree, this is Word of Command. You'll want a couple of different skills from here. You will want Clarity, which will chance that each time a skill is cast, that the next is free and does not trigger a cooldown. So the higher that is, the higher ability that you'll have to just spam your explosive shots, and that will then allow for Andriel to have some crazy damage output. Obviously, you want quick minded. That's going to decrease the cooldown of your active skills. That's always very, very important because you will want to make sure that Andriel can just keep throwing out abilities as quickly as possible. Whether it's Sanctuary for healing for your party or anything else, that's going to be what you want. Strength of Will grants a bonus armor based on your current will, so that will help to increase her strength and make her more powerful. And then these are all just mostly some other random abilities that you can get. But Renewed Power is another good one. Each killing blow achieved with a skill regenerates power, and then Staff and Steel increases. It unlocks dual wielding of a one-handed weapon alongside the staff and increases your damage. So rather than just have a staff in both hands, you can then get a staff or a sword that can go into her left hand and give her even more bonuses to her damage. So that's always good to have for her because you want her to be doing as much damage as possible. So that's pretty much it for a basic stats and abilities guide for each of these characters. It's not really meant to be crazy in depth because once you hit the level cap in War in the North, which is level 40, you should have access to every single skill. I just wanted to hopefully give you guys a bit of a bonus on what skills you should prioritize versus others. So that way, when you are building your characters, you can build them exactly how you want them to be to maximize their damage output and just make them to be the most busted characters ever. Later on, I will be doing a gearing guide so that way you guys can see what you will need to do to get the best gear possible. There is some crazy good gear in this game that will not only increase a lot of your damage output, but it will reduce item wear so that way you don't have to worry so much about damage durability, as well as just give you some other passive bonuses that will just make you stupidly strong. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this tutorial is helpful. I hope that this helps you to be able to build your characters exactly how you want them to be, so that way you can have the strongest fellowship in War in the North. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. This does really help. I'm trying to just build more Lord of the Rings content for gaming. So if you want to see more Lord of the Rings content, make sure you guys subscribe, and we will see you in the next video. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody.